Elevate to Evolve. Today we are continuing our conversation about communication and communicating effectively, except today we have a small twist. Our small twist is that we're going to be talking about your human design and how you can communicate effectively, and if and how you can still keep your authenticity while doing it. So, of course, joining me today, I'll be bringing in our co-host for Elevate to Evolve. And we have now coming in Miss Rasati. Say hi and tell everybody what it is that you do.
Hey, what's up, you guys? Jasati out here in Singapore, and as always, really grateful to be on this show with Kamisha. I am an emotional intelligence coach, so that means I talk about feelings all day long just to make sure you understand it's okay to have whatever feeling you're having, and the better you understand them, the better you can relate to the people around you. So that's what I do out here.
All right, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Next up, we have our second co-host who's coming in, Miss Tiffany Polar.
Hey everybody, so I'm Tiffany. I'm the founder of Audrey, Grace, and Izzy. It's an online jewelry boutique, and I encourage women to be the best versions of themselves. I encourage beauty inside and outside. Yeah.
All right, welcome Tiffany. And today we have a very special guest with us who's going to be talking about human design specifically and applying it to communication, right? So let me go ahead and bring her in, Miss Camille Talicia. Uh-oh. Can't hear you.
There we go.
There we go. Now I can.
Hey everyone. Thank you, Kamisha, for inviting me to be on the show today. My name is Camille Talicia. I am the Intentional Goddess, and I am a lifestyle strategist. I support women entrepreneurs and executives in creating lives that are just really aligned and powerful, using strategy as well as spirit and a little bit of human design and other tools to help them be their most empowered selves. So I'm excited to be here and be a part of the conversation today.
I love it. I'm so glad you're here.
For joining us. So we have been talking about, for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about communication and how to communicate effectively and how people's communication, their words affect other people, and how sometimes we're really selfish, right? And so we're not paying attention to what we're saying and how it's affecting somebody else, or we're not even realizing that what we're saying is affecting somebody else. And we kind of just say whatever we want, do whatever we want, because we're selfish, we're humans, right? So what I want you to do to begin with, before we jump on into that conversation about communicating effectively, is just tell us a little bit about human design and how it applies to people.
Yeah, I love that. So short backstory, human design is a tool that is like a synthesis of a few different modalities. So it combines, some of them include chakra system, I Ching, Rave Mandala, genetic code, and astrology. Ooh, how could I forget that? And so you put in your birth information, birthday, time, location, and you get this chart that comes up, and it has these different shapes and lines and numbers, and you're like, what is this? And people like me, they look at the chart and they interpret it for you based on which of those shapes are colored in. Those are called your centers. And so if it's colored in, it's defined. If it's white, it means it's undefined, which gates and channels are activated. And essentially what that chart gives us is what I like to, some people call it like the blueprint of you, but for me, what I feel like human design provides people is the how to the who and the what that they are, right? And so it tells you, or no, not the how, excuse me, the why. So like you have a type, right, based on some of your definitions. And so that gives you information about how you use your energy, how you work, how you best take action in the world. You have a profile, which gives you insight into your personality, as well as how you are supposed to kind of fulfill your purpose in life, right? And Like, for example, for me, my profile, I'm a 1-3 investigator martyr. And so the investigator side is exactly what it sounds like. I like to ask questions. I like to know things. And so how does that show up for me? I'm somebody who asks a lot of questions, like really, really good questions, right? Like that's one of the ways I communicate. And the martyr side for me is like, there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial and error in my life. And before human design, I felt like that was me being like a flighty person, like, oh, I like to try this and and it doesn't work out. And so I go try the next thing, or I'm really critical because I can always find where something is wrong. But now that I understand that's just my design, it allows me, number one, to help temper it, right? So that I now I'm like, okay, I don't have to come in so hot. I don't have to come in so strong. And I know why I do it. And so there's less judgment for me, and I can articulate it and share that with other people so they know how to receive me, my energy, my advice, my input in different ways. So that is kind of like a very brief synopsis. There are lots of components to human design, but those are just two: the type and the profile. There's also a strategy and authority, all of that. And I'm sure we're going to get into it. So that's why I'll keep it brief for now.
Okay, yeah. So this is very interesting to me. So I decided to try one of those charts so that I could kind of see what it looked like and to get a little familiar. So when you're talking, I would understand a little bit about what you're saying, right?
I love it.
So
I love it.
I did do one, but I was like, it asked me like the hour and the minute.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what the hour and the minute was. So how important is that part in your chart, that you know the hour and minutes when you were born?
It gets important when you get into like the nitty gritty, like which channels and which gates you have active. But if you are close to the range of like the hour range, if maybe you're a few hours ahead or a few hours after, a few hours late, you can still get your type, which it will support your strategy and usually your authority. Those three things will stay the same. Your profile may change a little bit, but that might also be pretty similar as well. So there's certain big picture things that you can still get, but when you want to get into the nitty gritty of it, you want to be as close to your birth time as possible. Even if it's within an hour, that will support you in getting, pretty close. Pretty accurate.
I definitely don't know the hour and the minute. And if I ever did, I don't remember.
Yeah, so, maybe on your birth certificate.
So I'm actually excited that you're talking about this, because I started dabbling with human design maybe 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So to find out all of these things, suddenly like so many things about who I am, how I do things made a lot more sense.
Yes.
The way my energy was, the fact that I tend to take naps, but I would feel so guilty for taking naps, but that's the way,
Are you a projector?
Yeah, I'm a projector. So I'm a, how'd you know? I'm a projector. I have a 4/6 authority, and it's just so much detail inside of there. I haven't gotten into the channels or the gates or anything yet, but it's been very interesting. So to have you on here is like exciting, because I feel like so many people could benefit from this if they just knew that you do things a certain way because this is just the way your energy works. And waiting for the invitation really made sense for me.
Yes.
Because I would feel so angry if I gave advice to anybody and they just didn't take it, or they pushed me away because obviously they weren't ready. So there's a lot in here that is so helpful, especially for business women.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, right, the gates and the channels, this is how I say it, like the center, your type, your centers, your type, profile, strategy, and authority, that's the meal. Like that's the meat and potatoes, right? And then the gates and the channels are like the seasoning, but you will not be nourished if you don't have the meal, right? And so it's like, even if you never study the gates and the channels and all of that, but you just like, I'm a generator, my strategy is to respond, my profile is a 1-3, and my authority is sacral. I'm describing myself, obviously.
Sure.
That will give you so much information and insight that will really support you in moving forward. It's like if you want to really, really dive in and start studying it and maybe teaching it, that's when the gates and channels will really, really serve you. But just knowing how to show up and how to use your energy, right? Like, I think that's the most important thing that a lot of people would benefit from learning, for sure.
So for the general public, sorry,
we're all talking at the same time.
I was going to say, I like what you just said about just knowing your energy and how you show up, because I think that's very important in what we're talking about with our topic of communication and communicating effectively. And also being able to communicate effectively but still be authentic, because I feel like a lot of people, if they communicated effectively, they felt like they wouldn't be as authentic, right? Because they want to be who they are and communicate how they want to communicate, but you can still be effective and still be authentic. So can you talk a little bit about how applying that energy and showing up applies to communicating effectively?
Yeah, there's a few different aspects that I feel like I want to hit. And since they're the different centers, there's 9 centers. One of them is the throat center, right? And so when I'm thinking about communication, that is one of the first areas I go, because there's some of us who have it defined, which means that we have consistent access to that energy to communicate and express ourselves, right? And then there are those of us, which is me, like my throat center is undefined, which means that my natural state, number one, I don't have consistent access to that communication, expression, energy, but my natural state of being is one in which I don't always feel the need to talk. Like I am quiet, right? And so there are people that inside of human design, let me say this. If I, as an undefined throat, am around somebody who has a defined throat, if I'm allowing myself to be conditioned by their energy, and by conditioned, it means like actually taking action on the fact that I'm feeling somebody else's energy to talk, but it's out of turn, right? Like I don't really have anything to say. I'm just feeling the pressure. And so I feel the need to speak. And I'm just like verbal vomiting over people, like all over everybody. That's inauthentic, right? So what is authentic for somebody like myself as a generator with an open throat, especially, is that I have to be in response. And so, or let's say I get to be, right? Like in the woo, well, we get to be. And so like in a conversation like this, it is more powerful for me to sit back, be in the space, and then when addressed, or if I have a question, but more so like when I'm addressed or asked, like, hey, Camille, what do you think about this? Or can you share this? That is me stepping into my authentic energy of communication, versus if I just came on here, was like, hey guys, so let me just tell you about this and da 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 da. Like, it's a lot. And I, especially studying this, I can see people who, when they have that open throat and they get access to that communication energy, they don't know what to do. And so you'll see them, they just start talking and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk, because either they're activated or they feel this pressure. And so they're saying nothing, right? It's like that's when it's ineffective communication, because they just feel this pressure that's not really theirs to say things and to speak and to talk and just share and share and share. And you're like, hey, so come back present. Feel the energy. Are you being in response? Were you invited? Like, because that's projector and that's generator energy, yes. Right? Reflectors, they have to wait 28 days. You're not going to wait 28 days to speak. So I feel like they're a combo of invitation and response. Manifestors, those are the only ones who really have that I can just initiate conversation energy. The rest of us, we are best in some form of being in response. And that is, to me, staying authentic and being efficient with your energy, right? Because otherwise you're just talking for the sake of talking, and that's still energy you're giving up. So I hope that answered the question. There are a couple other directions we can go, and some other, I'm sure it'll come up. So that's what we're starting.
Yeah, so I think that did. And I like what you were saying about people with their energy and they're talking, but not saying anything, right? So how does that apply to human design? Showing up as who you are, right? Because you're like, they're just talking, but they're not really saying anything.
Yeah.
It's just words coming out of their mouth that have no meaning, basically.
Yes. Yeah. They just, it really boils down to they're either not following their strategy, like I was saying, so they're not being in response as a generator, or they're not being invited, waiting for an invitation or recognition as a projector. Or on the flip side, right, like you do have the people who have the defined throat, so they're probably more than likely some form of well, actually, you can be anything with a defined throat, except for a reflector. So let me not even say that. But manifestors, again, are the only ones who can initiate. But even still, just because you have the energy to communicate or to say something doesn't always mean that you're supposed to. So that's where that awareness comes in, that I think a lot of people, self-awareness is a really big thing that I think human design gives people more access to. Absolutely. Because when you start thinking, am I just talking because I have the energy or because I'm feeling pressure? Or am I speaking because I actually have something to say? Because I actually want to initiate an action, because I want to initiate myself into action, or I want to initiate other people into action. That's the manifestors, right? Because they would be the initiators. Or is it because I'm asking a question, or because somebody has asked information of me and now I get to share? And the energy has shifted my way in some capacity. Like, I think that would be really part of that whole human design element in communicating effectively and authentically. Is, are you feeling the energy? Are you flowing with the energy? And are you following your strategy? Period.
Tiffany, did you have a question earlier, I think?
Uh-oh. Okay, y'all, sorry. I was trying to mute, unmute, and all this other stuff down here. I did, though. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I took my quiz some months ago, okay? And so the only thing I remember from it is that I am a generator. And when I found that out, I was kind of disappointed because it said that like 70% of the people were like generators, and I wanted to be something, a little more unique. So I'm wondering, what is the reason
Y'all the backbone
for so many generators?
You said what?
What's the reason for so many generators?
I don't know that there is a reason per se, but we are the ones who are really making things happen, right? Like, we're the ones who, we're called the worker bees. And, I get it, because when I was like, oh, I'm just a generator, I feel so much more powerful. But there is power in that generator energy as well, let me tell you. But we're the ones who make things happen. We get stuff done in life. Like, we have that sustained energy, or we have the big battery. That's our sacral. That's what makes people generators, is having that sacral center defined, which is it would be a red square. There's two squares on the bottom. The lowest one is the root. So the one that's right on top, if yours is colored in, you are a generator or a manifesting generator. And so that sacral, that colored in square, is our big battery that allows us to make the things happen and get things actually completed in life. And so that is why, because the manifestors, all they can do, and I say can loosely, okay, y'all, so don't go taking this for word, like, I'm a manifestor, I can't do nothing. No, just all, but manifestors, they're like the visionaries, they're the initiators. So they have the idea, they enroll people like generators to make the idea actually come to life. And then the projectors are like the guides. So the projectors are like, okay, so now that this is the project, where do people need to go that will make things the best? And then we have the reflectors who are like, okay, what is the state of everybody inside of the project? Are we feeling cohesive? Are we feeling healthy? Are we feeling an alignment? So, the more of us are needed to make the big things happen in life. That's so I'm sorry.
So what does it mean though? Like, yeah, what does it mean though? Like last year, for instance, with the pandemic and everything, it was like a really heavy year. Right? What does it mean when, as a generator, you find your battery being drained? Like, it was such a bad thing for me for like months.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple levels to that, right? And I felt that energy shift and pull last year as well. One, you have to think about, we're all impacted by the planets still inside of human design, right? Because astrology plays a role. And so as the planets move and all of that, like, there are energies that affect us. But I think there was just a collective overall sort of like, we're doing things that we don't want to do type of energy that was happening. And I think that for a lot of people, I'm sorry, let me gather that. One of the things about me, I have an open mind and an open head. And so there are times where my thoughts go butterfly. So sorry, let me get back on track. Let me circle back.
It sounded good to me.
Yes, I have some, I think, there's some other thoughts popped in at the same time. So I was like, oh, shoot. Okay. One, when generators are doing things that we don't want to do, we're using our energy in ways that that aren't fulfilling to us, that aren't satisfying to us, it's going to be depleted, right? Like, we're not going to enjoy it. Like, we are literally here to do work that we love, that lights us up. So it's not, even though we're the worker bees, it's like, work that we love. Like our fulfillment
Right.
comes from using our energy to do things that we love. So one, either there are people who didn't get to do the things that they loved anymore because of the pandemic, or two, they were forced to do things that they didn't love or in a way that didn't feel good to them anymore. And then you have to think about all the parents who now were like pulling double duty because they're home with their kids. So there's more energy being depleted than they're used to with inside of their workspace. And then the other piece of it, shoot, I lost the thought. There's another piece that was coming up for me that I feel like was on the little more on the woo-woo side. But I really think, I'm sorry, I lost that piece. So I'll just say for right now, it'll come back and then I'm just going to blurt it out.
No, it will.
Sorry in advance. But I would start with the fact that part of that depletion came from just how we were having to use our energy. And then also, right, like if we aren't fully recharging at night, like if we're not resting well with everything else that was going on, right, it's still a battery that has to be recharged. Like it might be a big battery, but it still has to be recharged. So if you find yourself burning the candle at both ends, because we're working it from home, right? And so it's harder to clock out when you're working from home than it is when you leave the office. So I think there were just a few factors. There's another one that came up and I'll find it again and I'll bring it back up. But I hope that answered the question to begin with.
It did. Thank you. Yeah. So like
that really helps though for people to understand like, you know, where or how your energy is used and to notice, you know, why. So for you to explain that generators really need to be doing things that they love or doing things in a way that suits them, that makes them feel better. I think that's something that people really need to understand. Something that I realized as I was doing, you know, I fell down a rabbit hole, y'all, when I first did this. So when I realized that I'm a projector, but I've been raised by generators, I pushed to find energy. I pushed to, I got to be doing. And I didn't realize that that was really, it was draining me. And then it was making me really feel like I was being, you know, I was bitter about everything and currently frustrated because I want to help. I want to be out there. I want to teach. I want to do all these things, but I have to generate all this energy to do all these other things in the meantime. So I was being busy, but I wasn't doing the work that really fulfilled me. So in that regard, like, I think it's important for people to notice where their energy goes or what it feels like, to really acknowledge their emotions as they go through their day, pretty much like the things that really, I'm excited, I want to do more of this versus, oh, let me drag my heels and like just get through the work day or whatever. So that was really important to me, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the fact that you identified that your parents were generators as well, because that's that conditioning that I was talking about, right? Like I was just talking about one center, the throat, but imagine your sacral, like the energy, the way you're supposed to work. Because not only, it's interesting, our society, because we have manifestor conditioning that's always like, just go do the thing you want to do. So we all feel like when we get the idea or when we get the confirmation, we're supposed to just move. But for 70 plus projectors plus reflectors, so like what manifestors are like 8% of the population, so 90%, 90 to 92% of us are not supposed to take action right away, right? And so you already have a bunch of us acting out of alignment, one. And then two, for 30% of the population, y'all are not supposed to work as hard or work as long. Let me say work as long as the rest of us. But if most of us are telling you, hey, you know, you got to work 8 hours fully straight through and don't care, sleep when you're dead, that sort of like yikes. But that conditioning can really, really create like, just, I feel like self-esteem issues, self-worth issues, and people really out of alignment. And like you were saying, for you felt anger, in human design language, they call that bitterness for projectors, right? And so that's what a lot of projectors experience, because it's like, number one, you're working too hard, you're tired as hell. And then number two, you don't feel acknowledged, which is another key piece, right? Like you're not being recognized. People are not valuing what you're offering because you're still out of alignment. Even if you're saying wise things, people will not receive it if they did not recognize your expertise, your knowledge base, like your wisdom, right? If they don't recognize that in you, and then if they don't invite you to share it, it's just like you're talking to a wall. And that can feel really crappy, especially when you know that what you're saying can help them and can serve them and make them better. And you're just like, just listen, just listen.
Pretty much. But that conditioning is real because you said 70% of the population are generators. That means our teachers, our coaches, everybody. You're getting it from everywhere saying, you got to work this hard. You got to get these degrees. You got to get a 9 to 5. You got to. And it makes it hard for us to follow our gut, even if our gut is strong, because it's like, this is the way, but I want to do it this way. How do I put those two things together?
Yeah. And to add on to that, there's the heart center, which is that small triangle on the right side. If you're looking at the chart, to be on the right side, it's a very small triangle kind of in the middle. And that is where our willpower is, right? But 72% of the population have that center undefined. So there's majority of people do not actually have consistent access to willpower, which means that they shouldn't really be making commitments and promises in these grandiose ways. But you have this 28%, and I'm guilty. I have a defined heart, so I must be out here telling y'all to make promises. But imagine being a projector, a manifestor, reflector who you don't have consistent access to work energy. And then people are telling you, you need to work this long and you need to commit to me that you're going to work this long and you need to promise me. And you just feel like crap at the end of the day, right? Because you're like, I can't keep my promises. I can't work this long. Like it's very interesting when you start putting it all together and creating a story. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned this.
I'm loving the energy talk. You've talked a lot about energy, and can you briefly, while we're going, and just if you just tuned in, if you're just listening now, we're talking about human design with Miss Camille Talicia, and we're talking about using it to communicate effectively and also authentically, to still be able to communicate authentically and effectively at the same time. Like you can do both.
Yes.
And so what I wanted you to do is just list each type so that everyone knows what you're talking about. List each type, give a little brief synopsis of what each type is.
I'll try. Okay. So 5 types: manifestor, generator, manifesting generator, projector, reflector. Manifestors, those are the ones who, I'm not going to get into the center. So they're the initiators, they're the visionaries. So they have the ideas. They're the ones who can take action on an idea. They still have an authority that they have to check in with to make sure that the action is in alignment for them. But once they get that yes from their authority, they can go do it, right? Like if they say, if you say, oh, I'd like to go build a house tomorrow. And that was a ridiculous example, but I want to go build a house. Like they are the ones who are like, got the idea, going to write the blueprints, going to do it. Right now you have generators and manifesting generators. We're family, right? So it's all generators, but then manifesting generators have a similarity to manifestors where they have a defined throat that is connected to a motor center. Don't worry about that. So, but either way, generators as a whole, we have to be in response, right? And so we have to wait for promptings, and wait is figurative, it's relative, right? Because there is a pausing period, but you're waiting to be in response because that sacral, that's our big battery, it gets activated when it's in response. And so you want the sacral to say yes, so you have the energy to do the work. So generators and manifesting generators, we wait to be in response. We're the worker bees. Once we get asked something and we get a yes from our sacral, from our gut, like we get a that's the sound of the generator, right? Now we're activated, we can go do things. We attract things to us, like our aura is open and enveloping. Manifestors, their aura is closed and repelling. And so they kind of just like push people away a little bit, not on purpose, but that is just a thing. Then we move to our projectors, and projectors, they do not have that sacral, so they are not meant to necessarily be the long-term workers, but they do have energy to do things. So it's not that y'all can't work, just don't work for long periods of time. Y'all are sprint workers is what I call it. Generators, we are marathon workers. That's usually the differentiator there. And so projectors are really like the guides. So they are the ones who, when like if there's a team of us, like let's say it's a team and it's the 5 types, the projector is going to be the one that's going to look at everybody, see what everyone has going on, see what everybody's skill set is, who has the energy to do what, and they'll be like, okay, if we invite them, right? Because the projectors have to wait to be invited, recognize, invited. But once they're invited, they are the best leaders of the 5 type, because they are the ones who have this ability to see and sample everybody's energy in a capacity, and then say, you do this, you do that, you do that. So projectors, when you talk about efficiency, the first ones I think about are projectors, because that's their natural space as guides and leaders. They ask questions that help get to the core of things, so they can direct people in ways when they are invited to, right? That sort of leadership. Then you have finally the reflectors. The reflectors have no definition in any of their centers. So they're just wide open. And what that means is that open centers in general mean that you are influenced or conditioned by the defined centers of other people around you. So reflectors, with everything being open, are always basically sampling, taking on, feeling other people's energy around them. And so what the reflectors are, to me, I feel like the reflectors are like the I can't say the name, the consigliere, the Italian advisor for the projectors, because the reflector is just going to be in the space and they're going to feel, they'll be like, okay, so Kamisha's getting a little tired, Tiffany is getting a little rowdy, and the team B over there is feeling really strong, so we're going to hold that team. And they'll just tell the projector, this is what you need to do, and this is what the team should do, and this is the state of things right now. And actually, they won't say this is what you need to do. They'll say, this is the state of things, this is what's going on, this is how people are feeling, this is who's healthy, who's not healthy, all of that. And so then the projector can say, cool, now that I have this information, I'm going to do da 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 da. And so for reflectors, their strategy is that they have to wait 28 days, or a lunar cycle, when it comes to making decisions on taking like big actions. I mean, like, you're not going to wait 28 days to go to the bathroom or eat food, right? But like the big things like money, career, relationships, housing, like those sort of things, they have to get their sort of information and data over a period of 28 days, because remember I said the planets impact us. So they have to feel when they get some sort of definition in each of the centers over the 28 days from the planets, not naturally, so that they can get clarity on what the right decision is for them.
So that's a whole nother level of sleep on it.
Hello. Okay. Did that sort of support what you were looking for?
Yes, and that was amazing, because I like what you were saying about each type, especially the reflector, and especially when you said 28 days to make a big decision. And they're out making this, affecting them as a person and who they are, and also the people around them, because they're acting out of alignment.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm really feeling this whole worker bee thing still.
The world doesn't work if y'all aren't.
I will say that in terms of like the communication and the alignment piece and stuff like that, I think that last year, with all of the energy that was going on and all the heaviness or whatever, that it did have me by the end of the year out of alignment. And so my battery was like depleted. And when it came to communication, I just kind of shut down. Like, nobody heard from me, period.
Do you still have your chart pulled up by any chance?
I need to go back and like find where I put that chart, because it had all this stuff and I'm like, I don't know what any of it means, because it is very involved. But I just remember like that, okay, you're a generator. I'm like, okay, I'm a generator.
Yeah. Because the other thing that I'm curious, the reason I was asking is because of that emotional solar plexus center, which is the triangle on the bottom right. On the bottom right. If yours is open, mine is open as well, right? And so what that means is that we are basically naturally empathic, right? Emotional empaths physically. And so there's this capacity for us to always sort of be taking on other people's emotions. And so last year was heavy double for somebody like myself, because not only was it just things going on and me adjusting, but then with everything that happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, I mean, we don't have to really rehash that, but the emotional state of our country was elevated, elevated, elevated. And if you were not aware of the fact that your solar plexus was open, or just kind of being fully present in the world in general, like, you were impacted, because open centers, they take in the energy and they amplify it. So not just the people in your, I mean, yes, it's the people in your direct space, but I also feel like energetically we are all connected to each other. And so you have that double whammy of just like feeling the energy sort of just like, it was very emotionally charged last year. And so I remember I had to do a lot of grounding. There's this creek by my house that I used to have to go and just kind of like release energy and all of that, because it was just a lot. And so I think that that could possibly have played a role in your experience last year as well. So I would really be curious to see your chart, you know, to see if that might have been a piece of it for you.
Well, I'm sure we'll find out exactly how to connect with you, because I know lots of people probably have questions.
We have a couple comments over here. One young lady saying that she's a manifesting generator and that she's really finding this conversation very interesting. So I really appreciate that. You've mentioned this one term over and over again, though, open centers versus undefined versus defined. So what does that mean exactly, as far, because like when you say, you know, if it's an open center, you absorb the energies of that particular center, and especially in this day and age of social media, it's almost like you can't get away from it. Sometimes you really have to shut down and unplug and get away from it for a while in order to like replenish. So what does it mean to have a defined center as opposed to an undefined center?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the defined center, just like basics level, it means that you have consistent access to the energy of that center, and it means that you are influencing the open centers of that same center around you, right? And so the sacral, like, let's use you for an example, because your parents are generators. You're a projector, so your sacral is not defined, right? I know that for like just projector means you
the bottom triangle on the right is defined and my bottom square is defined.
Yes. Okay. So you have a defined solar plexus and a defined root, but that sacral is the big difference between you and generators, right? Yeah. And so with them having that center defined, when you're around them, you, with your sacral being open, you have access to their energy now, right? Like whether you even want to or not. And so you can use it to your advantage at times where it's like, great, I have work to do. Bam, I'm going to go get it done. I'll be around my parents and I'll go do this. And, you know, like you probably could have been a straight A student in school because you have all the energy when you get home to do homework and that sort of thing, right? Even though you just did an 8-hour day in school, you come home and now you're like plugged in. Great. Now I can go do stuff.
Right.
And so that is how, and they're not aware of it. Right. And so like the sacral, that's less of a big deal in the sense of like working energy. But imagine if it's, okay, like the G center, which is that diamond in the middle, that is our self center. That's where we have our sort of identity. It's our GPS. It's like, I know who I am when it's defined. And so say that I know myself to be someone, and I don't think very highly of myself, right? Like I have all this sort of negative self-talk about who I say that I am. And you have an open G center. I am not necessarily, and I may show up on the surface level to you guys as like, oh, she's so confident, she loves, you know, like you might see my mask, but if my internal is this sort of really crappy, excuse me, dialogue, mine being defined and yours being open, you would feel my negative self-talk, right? Like you would feel that and I wouldn't even be aware of it, right? And so if you are present and you realize, okay, that's not even mine, like you with the open are like, okay, that's not even mine, so she must really not like herself. Like that's how you're feeling this, because that's what an open center would do, would be picking up on it. Now you're kind of looking at me like, what is going on? And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, they just think I'm the bomb. But in real life, you're like, no, she don't think. Because that defined center is always giving out the energy. And so, and the open center is always not just taking it in, but amplifying it. And so that is kind of the polarities of the two centers, is that one is always in the energy, experiencing it, that's their constant state. And then the other is like, you can feel the ebb and flow of when you're by yourself and you are in your natural state, hopefully deconditioned, you know, you've released the energy of the day. And then when you go into a space with the defined, you're like, oh, when you start paying attention, you feel that shift, right? And you're like, okay, is this mine? Is it theirs? Oh, it's probably theirs. You know, because that's the cue for any open center. When you start paying attention to the energies of it, if it feels like it comes on all of a sudden and really big, like it goes 0 to 60 instead of like 0, 5, 10, 20, it's probably not yours. That's the key. 0 to 60 all of a sudden in any of the open centers probably doesn't belong to you. So observe it and let it go. Did that?
But see, if I didn't ask these questions, I wouldn't know, like, this is how we relate to each other. This turns into, okay, how do I talk to you? How do I respond versus react to you?
Absolutely.
Why do we get into arguments?
Absolutely.
Why do we feel some kind of way? Why do we get vibes from people? Like that's
absolutely. Yes. That was a good question.
And I think it's really interesting because I can tell when someone's not being authentic when they say something or whatever. And I'm like, no, something's not really matching up. So I think that can be a problem with communication too. If someone is saying one thing, but then like the other person's able to feel like, okay, wait, something's not right.
Yeah. Because then you don't know how to respond, right? Because you're like, okay, especially if you have a defined spleen, which is our instincts and that's where our intuition lies in human design, right? And that's giving us our safety, fight or flight, like that sort of information. So imagine somebody's like smiling in your face and your spleen is just going off. This is wrong. And then you have that open solar plexus, right? And so you're also feeling they're smiling, but they feel really angry. What do I even say back to you at that point? Because I know that you're not being authentic in whatever's coming out. And it's either because you're unaware of yourself or because you are dishonest. You're trying to pull a fast one. And so then it's like, and that's when following your strategy really supports you, because it's like, if you try to, if a generator or a projector just tries to go and say like, well, I'm feeling da-da-da-da-da. Nope, out of alignment. Because maybe if you just waited to respond or waited for them to ask you a question, right? And you're just like, okay, so it's a no for me, because that's the next thing is like one of your authority centers is going to be like, hey, this isn't it. And then you can respond authentically to them, even if you're feeling their inauthenticity, right? So that's available to you when you start understanding and feeling the energies.
This is
I love what you just said right there, because one of the things that I find, and it's speaking to people. So I was just looking at what you said about the strategy. Mine says to respond.
So you're a generator.
And so sometimes when I'm having conversations, like I'm talking, and then I think about it later, like they're talking, and then I was like, maybe I should have just waited and just heard everything they said, and then afterwards, had something to say. So I'm glad that you're here and that you just said this, because when I looked at it, I was like, that sounds so familiar. And then I looked down and it says to respond.
Yeah. I
think that sounds so familiar. So one of the things that I think would be really important for those that are listening when it comes to communicating effectively and also authentically is how their type plays into, or the things that they could pay attention to when it comes to communicating effectively. Some things that they may, as that type, be doing wrong, or not necessarily even wrong, but something that they may do now that's out of alignment, right? Yeah. And so they're unable to communicate effectively because they're out of alignment with their type. So if you could give a couple of tips for the type on how to communicate effectively as your type and still be authentic, I think that will be very helpful to the listeners.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start at the top with the manifestors again. So part of the manifestor strategy in general is to inform, right? And so where manifestors run into issues is either they don't tell people what they're doing because they're kind of like, I just want to go, I don't want to be held back. And it ends up creating more issues for them because of just the nature of their energy kind of pushing people away anyways. And so their energy naturally, or their aura, let me use the correct terminology. Their aura in human design for manifestors is one, because it's repelling, there is a level of people not always immediately feeling trustful in manifestors, right? And so for them, learning how to communicate in a way that feels open so that people don't feel like they might get blindsided or they can't trust them or they might be ignored, that sort of thing. Like, and it's not to say you need to be walking around asking everybody for permission. That's not that's not the manifestor thing. Like, even though it says to inform, a lot of manifestors like, oh, so now I got to tell people, so they got to tell me if it's okay. Nope. You are just creating an aura of trust around you so that when you ask people to do things, when you invite people to do things, especially entrepreneurial manifestors, right? Because yes, you can catalyze action in people with your defined throw and being like, hey, I have this thing, go do this, da 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 da. But if they don't trust you based on your aura, it doesn't matter what you tell them to do. They're not going to, they're like, cool, great, thanks, bye, right? And so communicating in a way that is more open and transparent for the my throat is open, y'all, so sorry, sometimes I lose my energy. For the purpose of informing people and building trust would really support manifestors. For generators, yes or no is our big thing, right? Like we have to be in response. And the sacral is a yes or no response. So having people ask you yes or no questions, like being communicated to, I guess, communicated with, and yes or no will really support you. But then I also find that, I guess, phrasing things or shaping things in some sort of yes or no also helps people be in response better to me as well as a generator. And so, like, especially I'm thinking like marketing and talking to my audience or just working with my tribe. It's like, well, does this work for you? Yes or no? Would this feel good if I did da 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 da? Yes or no? Right? Like, it just is received better. So I would say asking questions as generators, because asking questions is a form of being a response, is really great when you don't have somebody that is giving you the prompt to respond to. So you can just ask the question. And so if you have a audience or a tribe or a class or whatever, or if you're just doing marketing in general, I would suggest trying to shape things in questions initially and then responding to people's responses, or saying like, hey, I'm open to take questions today. Letting people ask you questions also can be ways that you can help kind of create more ease with our aura, because we are open and enveloping. So that means like we're open to everything, because that is part of how we attract to things to respond to. But then enveloping, think about that, we're taking over. And so if people aren't ready for that energy, it still doesn't feel good, even though like we're just wrapping you in a big hug. Not everybody wants to be hugged. Okay.
Yep.
Projectors, one of the things for projectors is really establishing your expertise in a way. So like finding your home base so that you don't have to be invited. So like social media is really a great tool for projectors, because your space is your home. You can do whatever you want in your home. Like you don't have, you're not sitting in your home being like, oh, can I be invited to turn on the lights? Can I be invited to go down? No, it's your house. You do what you want, right? So when you're at your home, you are telling people, you're showing people what you do, what you know, how you can serve, so that they can now invite you, right? Now they want to give you invitations. Now they want to recognize your expertise. And then once you're recognized, asking good questions is a really helpful way for projectors to communicate, because their aura type is one that is focused. And there's another word, I'm totally blanking on the word, but focus is the one that is most important, right? Because it's like a projector talks to you and it's like they are talking to penetrating, focused and penetrating. There it is. Okay. they're like diving in. And so that can also be a little like, whoo, at first. And so you kind of like,
I've
hey,
had that.
ask you this first. Like, what does this feel? And that can kind of help ease them in. And then reflectors, y'all are just open and sampling. So there's not a lot of push. I don't feel like their energy is pushy, right? Like I feel like reflectors, they're sampling things, but to me, it also feels open. The reflectors that I know, like they just kind of have this like airy fairy quality about them. And so I think for reflectors, speaking as directly as possible when they are observing things will really support them, because they're all like, you can kind of just be all over the place. Your head is like, everything is open. And I know how it feels just having these two open, and sometimes communicating is challenging. And so it's like finding those ways that you can be as direct with your observations. It doesn't have to be about everything, but at least with the guidance and observations you're sharing, try to get specific, try to get direct. Yes. I think that was all 5.
That's still a lot. So the thing I'm quite jealous of generators for is because they're able to generate all of that energy themselves. They don't have to be around people in order to get inspired, to get, feel like they can, okay, now I can do this because I have these people that are supporting me. You can actually generate all that energy by yourselves depending on your mood or whatever you feel like doing that day. So
it still has to be a yes, because I can tell you, like, the things that are not yeses for me, I don't have the energy for. It still has to be a yes to activate that sacral, right? And so that's really, really important. Now for you, you have the second biggest one, which is the emotions, right? Like your emotions, that is a motor center. And so it's still, even though it's not the same, finding the thing that is a big yes, it's for your sacral, like you still get to find a thing that's a yes for your emotions, because that will give you the energy to do, to kind of generate the energy to do work as well. So don't count yourself out just yet.
Oh no, but yeah, I've built some habits, some generator habits, because that's the way we were raised or whatever. But I find that I kind of burn out faster if I'm not paying attention to what I want to do versus what I have to do to get to what I want to do. So yeah, I find that a lot of the people around me who are able to generate their own energy, they can kind of get in the zone, and it feels like they're doing what they need to be doing. So it's hard. It was hard for me to kind of figure out where or how. I didn't realize that, I could take naps and it'd be all right. I won't like fall apart or nothing. It'd probably be better. So yeah, it was interesting to learn all those things.
Yeah. And excuse me, let me say this to you. This is a note for projectors, especially, right? The reason why there's also that third level of like your authority, and what is your authority? So it's your strategy. Am I responding? Was I invited? And then your authority is telling you the yes or no. For projectors, it's really important to make sure that you're saying yes to the right invitations, because part of somebody's invitation is, I'm also offering an energetic exchange with you. And so if you don't feel like the person is inviting you and wants to be in exchange, it still gets to be a no, right? Like that's also, I think projectors especially, because you're like, well, they sent me a Facebook message and said, can I come do that? But like, is there collaboration? Are they going to be there to make sure?
Is it mutually beneficial? Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So that's, I wanted to just offer that as well.
So the thing that I find most interesting in terms of communication is that 70% of the people are generators, and we do better with yes or no questions. But society will tell you, don't ask those questions that just can give you with the one word answer, like the yes or no. Ask those open-ended questions, right? So that's a problem right there with communication.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Because I definitely agree. I think that there gets to be a little more value placed in the yes or no, but the open-ended does serve the generators in getting that clarity sometimes on if it's going to be a yes or no. Because it'll be like, oh, do you want to do da 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 da? And if we're not feeling the or the and it's like a like we need more information anyways. And so like we will now respond to get the information by asking a question, open-ended. But if somebody wants us to actually do something or make a decision, we are best served if they provide us a yes or no opportunity.
That's really good.
I
Lots to
also have a
consider.
question dealing with the generators because Tiffany brought up the generators. What's the biggest difference between the manifesting generator and then generator?
Good question. So manifesting generators, what that means is that they have a defined throat that has an active channel connected to one of the four motor centers, the heart, the solar plexus, the sacral, or the root. And so that makes them manifestors in waiting, which is what they call it. And so what that means is that while manifesting generators still have to be in response, once they get a yes from their sacral, they can like initiate the action. They have to initiate the action in order to actually get the truth of if it is something they really want to do. So manifesting generators, I say they have a double yes. They have the, yeah, I want to try. Yeah, I have the energy to try it. And then it's like, as I'm trying it, do I actually want to commit to it? Yes or no? And so that is the biggest difference. Whereas a generator, when they get their yes, it's I'm in. My yes is a final yes. It's like a one-time yes. The manifesting generators, it's a tentative yes and then a definite yes. So that's like the biggest difference. Yes. And then their working style is one where they are like a little more fast track. So they find shortcuts to get things done a little bit faster than generators do as well.
Okay.
I like that, and I like how you just explained it because it made it make sense really quickly of the difference. One is like a double opt-in, right?
Yes.
And then the other one,
yeah.
And then the other is just straight opt-in, no opt-in.
Right.
You just go. Like once I have my yes, I'm going. The other one is like, yeah, but let me check it out a little bit first and decide if I want to keep going.
Exactly.
So I love that how you just explained it. It was very clear.
Oh,
right up front. So
thank you
for that. So, if you're just tuning in, we have been talking about your human design and how human design affects communicating effectively as well as being authentic, because it is very important as being yourself, authentic, being able to feel authentic in your communication, even when it's effective. Because honestly, I feel like a lot of people don't communicate effectively because they want to do and say what they want, right? Do and say what they want. And then they don't think about the effective part of how it's affecting someone else. So we've been having a really great conversation for a little under an hour now. So what I would like to do is see if Camille has anything that she would like to share with the listeners about human design and communication that you think is absolutely necessary.
Gosh, there's so many things. I'm like, oh, I can
It's
talk
so
about
complex.
this, I can talk about that.
Well,
Okay.
go ahead and let us know. If it's more than one thing, that's fine too. Just let them know, help them be able to communicate effectively and authentically.
Yeah. So I think what will cover it all is that in human design, we have the signature and not self, or the self and not self, right? And so what the not self is when you are operating under the conditioning of somebody else's defined center where you are open. And basically what it means is that instead of you taking in the energy, observing it and releasing it, you are taking in the energy and owning it as your own. And so knowing what centers you have open, right? Knowing where are open or undefined, and knowing what it feels like when you are experiencing somebody else's energy. And the best way to do that is to be by yourself, like really get by yourself for some time, feel just like what is naturally you, like, well, honestly, you also need to understand some of the conditioning because there is a level of conditioning that happens just from childhood to adulthood. But just in general, feeling your natural state, like allowing yourself to release, take a bubble bath or take a really good shower and just kind of intentionally taking deep breaths to release any energy in your body that isn't yours. And then tapping into like, okay, so now that I am as clear as I know how to be right now, what feels like me, what doesn't feel like me. And then once you get that kind of locked in and you start getting around other people, how am I feeling different? Like, am I more emotionally charged when I'm around other people? Do I feel more pressure in my head now to kind of make sense of things or be certain about things or think about things and make this idea into something? Or do I feel like I need to be a different version of myself if you have an open G center? Or do I feel like now I need to go do all this extra work? I got all this extra energy. Do I feel like I'm under this time crunch and I feel stressed out and I feel pressured? Do I feel like I need to be spontaneous and acting on my intuition when I normally don't? Like, there's all these different centers. I think I just hit most of them. Oops, sorry, y'all. All the different centers and how the energy moves through. And so if now all of a sudden it feels different for you and you feel like you're doing things in this like immediate way that you're not really sure about, that aren't who you normally are where you're by yourself, that's a good sign that you have some sort of conditioning and you're being your not self, right? And so if you are not being yourself, your authentic self, it doesn't matter in what center. Any action you take, any words that you say, any thoughts that you are now trying to manifest into life that aren't actually yours, now you are not being authentically you. You are not probably being efficient if you don't know how to use the energy in that different way. If you're being your not self, you're operating under conditioning, you are not being authentically you, which means that anything you're communicating is not going to be the most effective or efficient for you. So I think that would be like my overarching umbrella, is like identifying your your undefined centers and how the energy moves in those centers when you're undefined. And now taking that into consideration, making sure that what you're saying, what you're doing is not somebody else's energy you're doing it with.
Got it.
Yes.
Amazing.
And your speedometer analogy was helpful to figure
Which
out
one?
whether it's mine or not.
Which analogy?
The speedometer, where it goes, from 0 to 60 versus like slowly building. I wouldn't have ever thought of that.
Perfect.
Yes, and I love that you also just talked about slowing down to feel the energy around you, what naturally comes to you. Because I feel like as we're moving through life, we're just going, and we're not as aware of what's happening. So we tend to just pick up everything that's around us in our environment. Yeah. And so when you talked about earlier in the conversation, being self-aware, that is definitely very important. And everything that you have talked about on this entire broadcast, that self-awareness piece really brings it all together, just being aware, because there's no way that we're going to slow down and really take it in and think if we're not even aware that we need to do it. Mm-hmm. So that's one of those things that we have to go back to, is that awareness and self-awareness, and being able to get to that self-awareness is just, kind of working on you and taking that time out to say, I need to slow down and work on myself and understand who I am and how I operate. And one of those ways is through human design. And we've had a really amazing conversation with Camille Talicia about human design. So I want you to tell everyone where they can find you and learn more about human design so that they could start working on themselves and who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again so much. And I wanted to just touch on that last piece you said, because Tiffany, that was the other thing that I was thinking about from last year, right? I told you I was going to come back, was the fact that people were now not surrounded by folks. And so they had to really deal with, who are they really? There were a lot of relationships that broke up and ended because people were seeing their real self versus the work them, because they spent when you work in the office, you spend 8-10 hours a day around certain people, a bunch of different people. So if you are open in all these spaces, you don't really know who you are. And so I think that was another layer of that heaviness, was people really unpacking like, oh, I thought I was this way, but I'm actually not, because now they're by themselves, they're at home, they're in their own energy. And if you are not used to it, or if you think you're supposed to be another way, what kind of discord does that create internally? So I told you it was going to come back. It came back right at the end. Thank you.
That's a big piece. That's a big piece. Who you think you are versus who you actually are.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So if you are interested in learning about human design, you can find me at introtohumandesign.com. That is my website. I do provide individual readings. I have business services as well for teams and team building and collaboration and all of that. And all of the things. And then theintentionalgoddess.com is my site for like my actual coaching and other work that I do. So that was that.
Now.
And can we find you on social media anywhere?
Yes, ma'am. Of course. The Intentional Goddess. Thank you. The Intentional Goddess or Camille Talicia. Like if you look on Facebook, you'll see Camille Talicia. Add me as a friend. Or The Intentional Goddess is my business page, and then Instagram as well. So yeah.
Very cool.
Right. Thank you again for joining us. And again, to reintroduce on our outro of our co-hosts, Rasathi and Tiffany, go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you as well.
Rasathi, I'll let you go first.
I was about to tell you. All right. Hey, you guys, my name is Rasathi. I'm actually based out in Singapore, but I'm an emotional intelligence coach. So I do a lot of self-awareness work. I help you guys understand where your emotions are coming from, acknowledge them, first of all, accept what they are, and then try and figure out where they're coming from so you can understand yourself in order to understand the people around you and communicate more effectively. And if you want to follow me, you can find me at RASATH1 pretty much anywhere. So
All right, y'all. And so I am Tiffany. I'm the founder of Audrey, Grace, and Izzy, which is an online jewelry boutique. I encourage women to live life beautifully. And for me, that means taking their gifts and talents and using them in a way that makes them feel good and that is authentic with who they are. And I encourage them to look beautiful in the process. You can find me on Facebook, Audrey, Grace, and Izzy. That's where I hang out most of the time. And Instagram, Audrey_Grace_Izzy.
All right, thank you. And I am Kamisha. I am a certified behavior consultant, and I work with moms to maximize your potential time and money so that you can spend more time with family. And I do that by helping you understand and be who you are authentically and move through life authentically in your home, in your business. And I'm always on Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram at Kamisha RM on Instagram. I'm on Facebook as well if you don't have Instagram, but I spend most of my time on Instagram, so you can find me there. So I would like to thank you ladies for joining today. And we are here each week at 8 p.m. Eastern. So we'll be back next week in continuing conversations that we feel will help people communicate effectively, as well as things about life and just being and existing, you know. So we'll be back next week. Any final words before we head out, ladies?
Not for me, not so much. I just enjoyed this conversation.
I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Camille.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. Obviously, I like talking about human design, so thank you for the invitation, for sure.
You make it understandable. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
I received that wholeheartedly.
Yes. Make sure to come back and see us next week, 8 p.m. Eastern on Elevate to Evolve. All right, ladies. Thank you. Good night.
Bye, y'all.